Our moderator is Miss Jasmine Termain. Jasmine is Associate Attorney with the law firm of Beaumont, Gitlin, and Tashjian. She holds a bachelor's degree from Baylor University, which we won't hold against her, and obtained a JD Juris Doctorate degree from Pepperdine University School of Law, while also receiving a certificate of entrepreneurship from the Palmer Center for Entrepreneurship and the Law. She has served as corporate counsel for companies involved in many global projects, has held positions in private wealth management with a division of UBS Financial Services, an internet publishing venture, and in the e-commerce division of a London-based company. Please join me in providing a warm welcome for Jasmine Termain.
Thank you, Doug. I'm pleased to be here today and to introduce our topic. Before we get going on the topic, I want to explain the importance of your key legal mistakes that you may make in your entrepreneurial venture. Last May, CNN Money reported that California small business failure rates ranked highest in the country at 69%. It's a pretty sobering statistic to understand that almost 70% of small business ventures will fail in this state. That said, from 2007 to 2010, the small business failure rate in California rose 40% during that time. Obviously, the global economy failure contributed to it, but understanding the key mistakes that you can make and how you can avoid them is critical to ensuring your success. So I'm very pleased to introduce my panelists, Hilary Gadsby, Deborah Sweeney, and Katherine Blair. The way we're going to set this panel up today is to invite you into a conversation between Hilary. Hilary Gadsby has started a business called A Gadsby Affair. It's an international events marketing business. It's done event planning, corporate meetings for companies such as Gucci and Ralph Lauren. She also started last year a company called Gain, and she'll explain the aftermath of the Gain company during the conversation today. We have Deborah Sweeney, who is the CEO of mycorporation.com. Deborah comes to us from Pepperdine. She's got a JD MBA from the school. And before she acquired my corporation in 2009 from Intuit, she served as its general counsel from 2003 onward. And then we have Katherine Blair. She is a managing partner at K&L Gates in Los Angeles. She is the partner in their corporations and mergers and acquisitions division. She has done all sorts of projects ranging from IPOs, representing underwriters, business financiers in industries as varied as mortgage, banking, retail. Very pleased to introduce these ladies and invite you into our conversation. And without further ado, we will get started on the panel. Okay. Hopefully I can navigate this. Is this on? Hopefully so. Yeah. Okay, very good. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay. All right. The way we're going to structure this is I'm going to ask questions of Hilary and Deborah. They are coming to you from different backgrounds. Deborah acquired mycorporation.com while Hilary set up a Gadsby Affair. We're going to go through a different, the series of setup ventures that they did and mistakes that they may have made along the way, and Katherine is going to step in and provide legal advice on ways that they could have avoided mistakes that they made, and they could have made certain decisions more effective for the long run. So without further ado, Hilary and Deborah, if you'd like to explain just your business ventures and how you got them started and what the process is that you use to get this going.
Sure. So Jasmine already alluded to that I acquired my company from Intuit, which, as many of you probably know, is a large publicly traded company. We were actually acquired by Intuit when I was the general counsel, and then I ran the division under Intuit for about 5 years. And the acquisition, I guess it was technically a divestiture by Intuit and an acquisition by me as an individual. And as part of that, I was negotiated the deal. Well, I had knowledge of how we got acquired, so it was kind of an interesting dynamic for me to then buy it back from Intuit since I was involved in an initial acquisition. And it required me to set up my own business entity and then to kind of form a holding company. And then that company ultimately bought the My Corporation division out of Intuit. So it was a lot of negotiation. I mentioned, if any of you were here last year, about kind of the nuances of involving counsel and at times not. And I think that there was a benefit to me of negotiating a deal. It's sort of an arm's length discussion when you're aware of the deal points and the parties involved. When it's a further distance transaction, when you may not know all the parties or you may be acquiring it from a company that you're not familiar with, then there may be a lot more nuances and involvement from third parties that could be very helpful. In my instance, it was unique, and I knew the entity from whom I was acquiring the business, and I knew kind of how they ran the business and what types of things they would look for and how to kind of pitch them on it. And I kind of joke, but people always say I come in smiling, but I sort of have little underneath ideas and things that I got a strategic approach. And so I didn't want legal counsel to necessarily get involved and over-lawyer the deal. And so while I brought legal counsel in, because under our agreement I was required to do that, I leveraged the legal counsel to the point that it really made the deal helpful. So I think when you're talking about business acquisition, one of the key things that is important to do and not make a mistake on is to really just sit back and let your lawyers do absolutely everything. And I feel comfortable saying this in that I am a lawyer and I did work with a lot of clients who were involved in acquisitions and divestitures. And when the lawyers know a lot about what's going on and a lot of the details involved in the transaction, it's far easier for them to help you get what you ultimately need. But when you as an entrepreneur, whether you're acquiring the business or starting the business, and you're not engaging your counsel sufficiently to help you make the right decisions, sometimes you sit back and think they know best, and a lot of times it's more about the business transaction and the key points of the business transaction and less about the law, because lawyers can ultimately help paper the deal and write it up for you, but what you need is to make sure that you're agreeing on the points that are critically important for both the parties involved. So I guess my lesson learned and my point relative to this is that you have to be in tune with your lawyers to communicate and to make sure that you're not just sitting back and taking a side role in the whole transaction.
Hilary, how did you get started with the Gadsby affair and Gain, actually?
I started a Gadsby affair in 2008 after working for a company that it didn't really work out, and I decided to start a marketing and event planning firm. And I got money from my then husband. It was kind of a gift, I guess you could say, to start the company, and I decided to hire an attorney. And my attorney was very expensive, and it pretty much took most of the investment that he gave me. But those are mistakes that you can make. So when you start a company, you either go the lawyer route or you go something like the My Corporation, where it's a lot less expensive. But I mean, as Deborah's saying, you kind of have to know where to guide your lawyer, and I didn't know how to do that. I had never started a venture before, and so that was my mistake in spending all the money on the attorney. But and then the other one, I started a company called Gain last year with 2 different partners, and unfortunately it didn't work out because the 2 other partners got in a very, very big argument and didn't work well with one another. And my mistake, I think, was just getting involved with those 2 people and not knowing them well enough that they couldn't get along.
So Katherine, from your perspective, how could you work with entrepreneurs and just guiding them through that initial setup process?
Okay. Well, first of all, when I work with entrepreneurs, I'm so sad to hear if a company says, the mistake I made was paying my lawyer. No, and I don't take offense to it, because honestly, my advice to entrepreneurs would be is that when you're looking for legal counsel, I think what Deborah and Hilary say is on point in that, one, you want to see where you are in your stage of your business. And if you are engaging legal counsel, you want someone that you like working with, who is, in a sense, when I work with small companies, I know they're small companies, you don't have a lot of resources. I don't want to suck all the money out of that. I want them to be successful, because if they're successful, I can be successful with them. And it's almost like a partnership arrangement. And so I'm there on the ground floor with them. And so if I can help them be more cost efficient, whether it's maybe referring them to someplace like mycorporation.com where they can do their initial startup really cost efficiently and easily, and then as they progress as a company and maybe their legal issues become more complicated, then that's where they can benefit from a traditional lawyer. So, my advice to entrepreneurs in the position, whether it's, Hilary just starting a business, Deborah, who, was strategic in using her legal counsel and, knew exactly what they wanted from them. I love that with clients. I want clients to tell me how I can help them. I look at my role as you are the business person. I want to be able to advise you so you can make risk assessments. I can say, okay, here are some things to think about in this transaction. We can either go hardball on this, you can think of all these transactions, or maybe you can pull this lever over here and use it as a negotiation point. And I want to be able to work with my client to be able to do that. And so I think Hilary is right on point in that, be smart about the advisors, not just lawyers, but the advisors that you work with as well. And don't just think, oh, the lawyer's going to handle this. Because a lot of it, especially in transaction, you're working with business lawyers, a lot of it is business points, and legal does come into it, and legal can provide you, again, I look at it as risk assessment. And some things you may say, well, this is, you can look at this provision and maybe we can negotiate these points in it, but here's something that's more important to you. And so you want your lawyer to be able to understand that too, so that they don't negotiate what's material, for $5,000.
Mm-hmm. Well, I also think that, it's interesting that we're an all-women panel because your points, I think that if I had met somebody like you or like Deborah or Jasmine, I think that I would have it would have been a lot easier for me to start my company, because the gentleman that I was working with, he was a Wall Street attorney, and he didn't really know anything about my type of business. He didn't know a lot about marketing. He didn't know about how a woman starts a business. He doesn't have a lot of women clients, and I think that if I had maybe worked with a woman and who understood exactly what I was kind of going through, it might have been a better idea.
And Katherine, as far as working with clients from the legal perspective to do risk assessment, do you have different types of company structures that you recommend more than others, and just sort of going through the general entity setups to give the audience an understanding of the assessment that they need to make in going through in going through that process?
Well, first of all, just to quickly touch on the developing a strategic plan. From a lawyer's perspective, I'm not going to say, what's your business plan, and I'm going to assess it. But from my perspective, I like to know what your goals are as a client and what you intend to do. And I'll use a business plan if you have one. More than happy to look at it and kind of give, a lawyer's perspective on it. And two, to the extent that you go out, and we're going to talk about it later, do third-party capital raising. A business plan not only helps you market your company, but again, you use it with your advisors because it helps me understand who your target investors are, so I know what kind of legal work is going to go into it. With regards to the choice of entity, you have all these choices, and you can go into, there's the tax aspect and the legal aspect. Realistically, it will come down to 2 or 3 of them: corporation or S corporation and LLC. That's honestly what we normally see. And I usually talk to folks about, the tax. Do you want a flow-through entity? You're looking at an LLC, maybe an S corporation. Okay. Sometimes though, an LLC, it's for a lawyer side, the documentation can be a little bit more expensive, but I know that there are places and resources that you can go to. You could do it, again, you're trying to minimize your cost from the get-go. If it's just you by yourself, there's not a lot of complicated features. You don't have issues on the flow-through of who gets a preference of distributions first out of your LLC. You're not splitting up weird percentages in your profits and losses. You could do something real easy, and as long as you have a good accountant as well, and they can work with you on the flow through. That's important if it's just you. A corporation is if I know that somebody is going to be, progressing to angel investors and traditional venture capitalists, and maybe it's on a relatively short time frame too, within maybe 2 to 5 years. I know 5 years is on the outset. and stuff, because you might as well do setting up a C corporations very easy. You can do very something standard, and plus, especially when you get your VCs in there, they're just gonna, they're gonna totally change it all. And they understand C corps, and that's just the way it works, has been my experience.
Very good. That's good advice. Moving on to the next hurdle that business entrepreneurs encounter is, who do you engage in business? And I'd like to ask Hilary and Deborah to explain how you got into business. I mean, you acquired from Intuit. You started the Gadsby affair. It was your own entity, but it was during the middle of a marriage, and then you started Gain with partners. And I'd like to understand the dynamics of the business partners that you brought in and how you approach those relationships from a personal side and also from a business side, and how you memorialized and formalized these types of arrangements.
So in the acquisition of my corp from Intuit, I leveraged actually a lot of my contacts from Pepperdine because, well, first of all, my husband is a graduate of Pepperdine. Thanks to Janet, we got married. This is on the internet. Why am I saying all this? Anyway, so a lot of your contacts are very important in your business, and I think that as you're starting out, developing those contacts are critically important. And developing contacts from the legal standpoint, funny enough, the lawyer who worked on my deal was a law clerk of mine and was also a graduate of Pepperdine. And it was sort of a keep the deal on the down low, because I didn't want it to become a huge, well, Intuit, we sign deal and don't disclose, it's quiet until it's done. So he happened to be practicing in New York, and I thought, well, what better place than someone who's not right here in California and talks to anyone around here? And so I leveraged the kind of that connection, leveraged the connections from business school, simply because those are people who kind of had the business acumen and made me think about those types of strategies. And so I guess number one is contacts. I think the other area is really just being cautious and thoughtful about your nothing. Everyone rushes with a lot of stuff when it comes to business. Like, I felt like we got to get this done, blah, blah, blah. And I think really thinking through, so taking the strategy of taking a deep breath and analyzing the process, and then just being patient, because not all deals happen overnight. And I think a lot of times we think this should be done by the end of the month, or even when you're being pushed by an investor or by your bankers or by your partners. And I think really just sometimes taking a deep breath and thinking it through is really critically important, and leveraging all of your contacts. And then my third point is, while you're doing all of that, don't necessarily take any one person's point as law, because I am an assimilator of information. I love to kind of hear what people think. I still do this in my business today and drive people crazy, because people think I definitely agree with them as I'm listening, and then I take it and I think about it, and I actually decide I don't want to go that direction. But it's really good to assimilate different people's information, to get different people's perspectives, whether it's young entrepreneurs who have that excitement and jazz for social media or the way you should go with your business, or if it's entrepreneurs who've got a ton of experience, or it's lawyers who've done 20 of the same deal. So I think kind of making sure you take into account all of those pieces, and then finding what will work for you, and then making sure that you take time to think through that and don't just feel rushed and pressured all the time, because deals do get stressful. And they say, like with everything, there's something called deal momentum. And once you're going, and you're just deciding, and then you start fighting, and people are fighting, and then it just becomes kind of out of control. And I think that's when you need to just take a step back and try to evaluate what's going to be the best thing for your business and for you.
Yeah, I would agree with Deborah. I unfortunately took the very fast approach and got everything done, because I went in with a client. I had a client from a previous, the company that I was working with. I had brought them in. We never signed a deal, and they ended up working with me. So I went into my business with one client with 7 different projects, which was really great for me, but it didn't allow me to leverage the contacts that I had, and also kind of build a team, because as a business owner, you want to build your team. You want to have the best advisors possible. Your attorney, your business manager, your accountant, just as what Katherine said. And I did it too fast. And now I'm learning now that I have to build the right people around me, the right strategic partners, the right team.
Okay. And, excuse me, Katherine, from your perspective, how would you advise entrepreneurs in the formational stages of how to approach partners, partnerships, how to effectively structure them?
Wow, law is easy, relationships are hard. It's when working with clients, and again, if they're just by themselves doing it, easy peasy. But when you're dealing with, maybe a few parties, I think it's so important. Communication is such a big thing. So I want to make sure everybody's on the same page. We want to make sure that the documents reflect everybody's understanding of their ownership, and then also the understanding of potential ownership of others, whether it be additional investors, and also whether it's employees who are going to potentially participate in the ownership of the company. And so the first thing is, again, it could be really easy. You establish an LLC, maybe it's 50-50, maybe it's 49-51, however, if it's just two people, same thing with a corporation, issue some stock to folks. The issue is not only as it grows, but if it still starts out as small, also to think about what agreements do you want to have between each other or among each other as the parties too. You may say, hey, we've been friends for life, we kind of get it, but people's lives change and evolve over time. And so again, I look at my job saying, I just want to educate you of things to think about, okay? So what if your partner goes into hard financial times and he needs to or she needs to sell out of the business? How do you want to handle that? Do you want them to be able to just sell their interest to anybody and all of a sudden you're a business partner with Jack the Ripper? So you want to kind of foresee, and it goes both ways as well. What if, our spouses involved? What if people, get divorced and suddenly they're having to split up their property and you're suddenly ownership, with somebody's spouse? So you want to think of, the ownership, what it looks like today, and then what are things that could happen down the line. Also, I know people, and I talk with folks all the time, and they say, well, how much percentage should I have? How much percentage should I own? And, as founders of a company, obviously, you're going to have the initial highest percentage ownership. And then you want to bring somebody in. When you bring them in, don't ever say, and you're always going to be a 5% owner. Okay? Because first of all, if somebody's asking for a straight percentage ownership, they may not be the right person for your business too, because they should understand that a smaller piece of a bigger pie is more valuable. They should be, a partnership within your business so that they are part of your growth and they see where it's going. And so, again, you want to have an understanding. They should know that, if you are looking to bring in additional investors, that they understand that. Also, when you speak to maybe potential investors, and I know it takes a lot of time, but document it in some way. Okay, because I come across, such as life. I mean, things happen, where, you talk to somebody and you say, I'm going to give you this much, and I'm going to give this person that much, and next thing you've given away 200% of the company. Then you get some real big strategic investor who's coming in who wants to do their diligence, and they want to look at all the documents, and you got a lot of cleanup going on. It's nice if you can keep it clean from the start, where everybody knows what their position is, what they own as well. Also with the initial investors, they may also know that they are probably, they're getting you going, their friends, their families. But if you get into strategic investing, they may have people who have priority over them as well. And you don't want to give the people who are your initial investors so much control that it's going to prevent you to be able to bring in other strategic investors. And I guess I have another point here, contribution of assets and intellectual property. Hilary, from just starting a business from the ground up, your contribution was your know-how, your contacts, what you did. Deborah had an existing business, and she was buying it from somebody else. Usually if you're starting it from the ground up, you're going to be contributing maybe some intellectual property. If you're doing that, are you licensing it to your entity? Are you bringing it from a former employer? And if you are, I say watch out, because make sure you're not contributing some sort of intellectual property asset that they then claim that they own. So make sure you understand that aspect of it as well. If your partner has an intellectual property, just make sure you understand the parameters of it and that you also do the proper transfer documentation. I'm not an IP attorney, but I can say that, again, on a very basic level, you look to see what you have, what you're contributing, whether it's, your know-how, your services as well, and it also reflects the ownership that you have. Just understand the process and make sure, I'll tell you a thing, a big thing that I like to tell people is common sense. Common sense goes a long way. I mean, there's legal and jumping through hoops and, checking off the boxes. Does it make sense to you overall when you are establishing your entity, okay, and your vision?
Excellent. Deborah, as far as the intellectual property is concerned, that I am assuming was a large, that's effectively the whole asset that you've acquired.
Yep.
What steps did you take in identifying and then transferring during your acquisition of my corporation?
Sure. So it was pretty well documented under a publicly traded company what intellectual property we held, from our copyrights, which primarily exist around the website itself, the content that we created relative to our document filings with the states, our trademarks, domain names, all of that was pretty well documented. So I guess when you're coming in fresh to a new acquisition, you would want to make sure you do your due diligence to make sure what is the intellectual property, and also identifying the key intellectual property that's critically important to you, because sometimes, at least when we were acquired by Intuit, there were some pieces of intellectual property that the original owners wanted to hold on to. And so just to identify that and know, and then communicate it, because you do not want litigation when you're being acquired or when you're acquiring a division after. And there's lots of provisions for that in your acquisition documents. What if someone didn't disclose? What if there's information that comes out afterwards? And you'd rather not go there. So I think as long as you're clear up front and keep track of everything, from your filing of your trademarks, from your domain names. A lot of people I know, and I do this too, I get a wild idea and I think, I think I'm going to start a business that's called willdrafter.com. And so I'm going to buy that domain name. And then it exists, but I don't really document it with the rest of my everything else that's my corporation. And so those types of things happen a lot. And when people are buying or selling, those types of assets sometimes get lost in the mix. And when the acquirer thinks they're acquiring all of your intellectual property, or you attest to that in your documentation, that can quickly become a big problem. Because if you're thinking, I sold them my corporation and all the assets relative to my corporation, but my willdrafter.com site is totally a different story. That's what you think, but that might not be what your acquirer thinks. And so I think that those are clear-cut ideas and things that you need to document. And when you're selling or buying, you need to just be clear on that. So I think when I did it, it was a bit easier because Intuit had housed everything and we were uber organized, and they pretty much gave me everything with the exception of one crazy trademark that didn't matter. But at the very least, I knew it didn't matter, they knew they wanted it, and off we went.
Excellent. And Katherine, from your perspective, how do you work with clients in protecting trade secrets and even educating them on what may qualify as a trade secret and taking the necessary steps to protect not just trade secrets, but their intellectual property in general? How do you work with entrepreneurs who are, in one respect, predisposed towards wanting to explain it to people so that they can get the community around it and get the business venture going, but also needing to rein it back in so that they can protect themselves and ensure the business is set up for long-term success? Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all, I find that people who are starting businesses, on the most part, are pretty attuned to intellectual property. I mean, it's just part of our everyday life, whether it's source code, software, trademark, branding, your name. And it's on the checklist of things to do when you're first kind of starting your entity. So what we like to do is we at least like to walk through and identify what those potential things are, and then prioritize what you want to spend your money on, because whether you want to file protection as well, and which ones are important to you. What we also do is not only protecting it, but also internally, you're going out and you're marketing your company, you're talking to investors. We want you to consider confidentiality agreements and non-disclosure agreements. And if you're working with consultants, when you get consulting agreements, just don't think that it's legal boilerplate and everything's good. Read it. Make sure that the agreement matches your expectation and what you own and what the consultant owns, okay? So that they don't necessarily walk out the door, that's your most important source code or your most important copyright, trademark, and such. So those arrangements are very important as well, and also with your employees. And don't just assume because you use it, whether it's your company name, that it is automatically protected. I filed it with the California Secretary of State, and so that's my corporate name. They've approved it. You need to also look at it from both an IP perspective as well. You can go to the Patent and Trademark Office. I mean, everything is so accessible online these days. You could do a quick search. I know that I have IP attorneys who do sophisticated searches, and there's analysis as well that goes into it. And again, you want to, how much money do you want to spend as well, and also educate yourself about it, which helps a lot.
Excellent. And okay. Moving on to the critical aspect of any business, how do you get it started? You generally need seed capital of some sort, whether it's your own money or you've borrowed, it's debt partners, equity partners. And so I'd like to ask Katherine I'd like to ask Hilary and Deborah, how did you initially get the financing going? Not to break any confidentiality agreements you probably have, Deborah, but just to sort of explain the process of how you got that ball rolling and instructing the audience and how you go and raise capital and the pitfalls that you may have had and what you may have, in retrospect wanted to do differently.
Sure. All right, so in the acquisition of my corp from Intuit, I had a couple different financing structures. Fortunately, I mentioned my husband before, but he had a business, so we were able to leverage some of our savings and also negotiate in the process a buyout over time. So I think that was one of the good opportunities for me, is that Intuit knew they wanted to sell it to me and for it to be successful, and so we worked together as a team, and a lot of times that's not always the case. So they wanted me to thrive. They wanted the business to be an ongoing concern. I was taking every single one of the employees that was employed in our division and hiring them under the same salary and benefit structure that we had under Intuit. That saved them a heck of a lot of money because their severance and all the craziness that they would have paid out would have been. So I was both able to negotiate it on a decent rate for the acquisition relative to the revenue. So those are the pieces that were helpful to me in the negotiation process. And then also, funny enough, they required that I have extra, well, not funny enough, I guess that's standard. It seemed funny to me that they cared, but I had to have banks that were willing to back me for a couple $1 million at a time when banks were backing nobody for anything. And so I think with that, it played into the part of having really good credit, honestly. And a lot of that when you're just starting out, banks care what you do personally. And if you have had a nightmare personal life, you're going to have a tough time getting bank financing and getting many financiers now. And maybe 7 years ago, this was not at all an issue. Banks were throwing money at everybody and everything seemed happy and the internet was taking off and anything you put .com at the end of it, you got money for it. That's not the case anymore. In fact, a lot of times it's the opposite. And so frankly, the biggest part of, I think, how I got the bank backing was because I had good credit and because I had a husband who had a business and because we had a history of 10 years of doing a good job by making sure we didn't have debt. So if you're looking at starting your own business and you're looking to banks, and frankly, a lot of times if you're looking to any kind of financing, people are interested in knowing how you manage your personal life and how you manage your assets. And if you're a mess, that's not great because people are not going to be thrilled because, frankly, a lot of times people run their business like they run their personal life. And so it's important to be on top of that.
I mean, mine was pretty straightforward. I was married, and my husband gave me money as a gift, and that's how I started my company. But I will say that now that I'm divorced, there's something that I really wish that I had done was, even though he gave me the money, we probably should have had some sort of contract between us. Even if we were married, we should have had something between us that said, that this was a gift and it was not to be paid back. And because when I went through my divorce, unfortunately, he tried to take my business away.
Yeah. That's one of those unforeseen life events,
well,
where,
exactly.
you're in the relationship and, you're married and they help you with the money, and then a few, years down the line. And that's why I'm saying relationships are hard, because while you're married, it's kind of awkward to say, let's just document in case this doesn't work out in the long run. How do you do that? On one side, do you say like, hey, I've got this nice founders agreement, so, this and stuff, so there's no perfect answer, to just say like document everything. That's just part of life, of kind of, what you experienced. Yeah. Financing, from, again, the lawyer's perspective, when people are first starting out, if they don't have a run of successful companies that they have established and sold, and so they don't have a history, you're looking at really your savings, yourself, your friends and family. And I like to tell people, keep it simple. Because those are your loved ones, and and make sure again that they're on the same page as well. And try to keep it to a circle that's a smaller circle. Don't like go to everybody, because the more people you have involved, it's great to bring all that money in, but it does make it more difficult down the line. So be strategic about your investors too. Then if you are also envisioning that you will get traditional third-party investors, angels, venture capitalists, and such, go back and make sure that you have a good grasp on your strategic plan, your exit strategy, your market. Look at it as like a product. You are the product. You got to sell yourself to these people. So know who your audience is. Go to events and meet your potential investors and understand what they want. The Los Angeles Venture Association, they have events where they go and they have people on panels and they talk about what they're looking at. Because the economy and the local market, the Los Angeles market, if you're looking down here, they may be looking for something in particular as well. Because once you go in and you pitch yourself to them, and I'm sure you guys hear this all the time, it's kind of a one-shot thing, and then it's a small community, they may start talking to each other as well. Now, it could be something where somebody says, I'm not interested, but I heard about this company, and then they pass it on to their friend. Or it could be, wow, that was the worst pitch I've ever seen, and next thing you know, you can't raise money in LA, and you're having to pack your bags and move to another town and start over again raising money. So, it's think strategically about it when you start looking at the third-party investors. And, when the terms come in too, make sure it aligns with your expectations. You're going to negotiate the valuation of your company. Don't think, hey, my company's $1 billion and anything less than that I'm not going to accept. Be realistic, be flexible, talk to as many people as possible, and then also understand the terms that are being asked. And that's where your lawyer can talk to you about, what's this anti-dilution, full ratchet, weighted average? What does this mean to me? Who can I talk? How much is this constraining my business? Every time I, take out a loan for $10,000, I have to go to, my VC person and get their okay, and they have a veto power. So understand your terms as well, because again, as you raise more and more money, it's going to get more and more sophisticated and complicated. I'm not going to talk about equity and debt. That's simple. Okay.
Okay, excellent. Moving on to the business relationships and just how you've been able to leverage the, like you said, Deborah, contacts that you've had, and Hilary, the client that you brought in. How did you approach those? When did you document things? When did you not document things? Are there situations that you ran into where, in retrospect, you may want to have changed the approach, and how did you navigate those?
Sure. I think we've talked quite a bit about how it's important to document a lot of what you're doing as you're setting out with your entity. And maybe having had the legal background, I just tend to do that as a matter of course. So, when I enter into a partnership, even when I bought Michael from Intuit, we actually entered into the agreement relative to the purchase sale, but then we also entered into a partnership agreement. And so we made sure to document all of that. And every partnership I enter into with our product, we offer lots of different bundling packages. So with Network Solutions or Vistaprint or all these different partners, DocStock, and different things that people work together in partnerships. And so you enter into agreements. You often start with a non-disclosure as you're discussing or negotiating the partnership, and then you often move then into a partnership agreement. And I imagine, but I can go into some of the details of what types of agreements, but I believe it's critically important to have a partnership agreement in place where at the very least you're discussing what are the kind of terms and ramifications of your partnership, what is the exchange of revenue, if any. If there's none, be clear that it's, you know, partnership in kind. Basically, we do a lot of cross-referring. We do, now in the age of social networking and communication, we do a lot of just cross-blogging and newsletters and those types of things, which in many ways can be perceived as partnerships, but you want to be clear. Are you going to share revenue with that person when you gain revenue from anything that they've done to market your business, and vice versa? And then, you know, employment agreements, I think, are another component of it's not really viewed as partnerships, but I think you just need to be clear with your employees what type of relationship you have, and what their salaries are going to be, and what their expectations are, and then, of course, having those internal kind of handbooks relative to kind of how you run your business. I deal every day with employees asking me, well, I thought such and such holiday, or I thought If you have things in writing in advance, it's just way cleaner than going around. And I think one thing, and to the point of all of our many points that we've been making, is not everything is, when it's written in stone, it's forever. You can become an LLC and then change to be an S Corp if you're, or a C Corp, if the people who are acquiring or investing in your business require it to be such. You can have an employee handbook that the next year you give totally different holidays. I mean, all of those things are changeable. So I think you just need to document as you go and stay on top of your partnerships. And when partnerships end, it's not a bad idea to send a little notice that the partnership's over, because if you are acquired, if there are investors, all of the due diligence that's being talked about, it's your whole history, your lifetime of your business. And so documenting all these partnerships, I think I had an agreement in 1998 with XYZ person or this or that. It's good to just also close out things as they no longer become relevant to your business.
Very good advice. And we're going to make this open for a few minutes of question and answer, but before we get there, I'd like Katherine to just go over some of the details, as we call it. These seem totally simple and straightforward, but it's always good to have reminders. So what are some of the small details, Katherine, that all entrepreneurs should take into consideration?
The details. You know, when you are, if you're lucky enough that your business is successful and it goes beyond where your operations currently are in other states, think about the fact that you want to qualify to do business in those states. It's like, you know, you're incorporated in one state. For example, let's say that you organize your company in Delaware, but your operations are all here in California. You have to register with the Secretary of State in California due to qualification to do business. You know, and again, from a legal side, we look at that as important because it has to do with your ability to bring lawsuits. Fictitious business name filings, you know, we do those a company where maybe it does business under a different name, where it's located. Again, it's part of the protection for the company, so think about that. You can go online, you can look at, you know, where your operations are, where you're doing business as well. Federal tax ID, you just do that when you organize, and especially if you have employees. Also, California has a lot of employee regulations, so make sure that you understand what those are as well, and business licenses. I mean, just depending on where you are. And again, I mean, I'm just kind of generally talking about, you know, what this is, because these are the details. And you know, it could take, you know, it doesn't take that long to do them. You can go online, you can search what needs to be done. You can do a lot of these things yourself, or you can have your roommate do them, or your girlfriend or boyfriend, you know, do them, and just kind of do some simple filings.
Excellent. I'm just going to put a slide up that has different resources the panelists have turned to in their own ventures, and then I'd like to open it up for the next 10, 15 minutes for anyone in the audience who'd like to ask questions of Hilary, Katherine, Deborah on how they got started, or just, you know, things that would help you as entrepreneurs.
Right. I'm Armin, and my question is the following. Let's say you want to do some good, but at the same time you want to pay some bills on it. Okay, so what are your thoughts about how you can actually make money creating a nonprofit? Because I noticed that wasn't one of the legal entities. Just wanted to...
No, you're right. Nonprofit, creating a nonprofit actually is a different animal. And I purposely did not talk about it. I have folks who deal directly with nonprofits. You set yourself up a particular way and how it's managed. So that is it's a different discussion, I guess, from the legal end with regards to, you know, the tax filings that you make and the documents that you prepare. I don't know, I don't think that answers your question. You're saying, so I can't tell you exactly how it's done right now.
Yeah, I'm more interested as far as like, okay, so can you pay yourself in a nonprofit?
Yes.
Just high level stuff.
Yeah, you can pay yourself. I mean, it's overhead, it's administrative fees.
Can you repeat the questions when they ask us? We can't hear their question up here.
Sure. His question was, if he wants to do some good and make some money at the same time, are you able to set up a nonprofit and actually pay yourself a salary, or is that outright prohibited? You can, of course, it's an operating expense, pay yourself through a nonprofit, but it's a really highly specific animal. Katherine doesn't deal with those types of structures and setups, but if someone is thinking of the nonprofit route, it is highly recommended that you seek legal counsel from the outset, because it is an extremely fact-specific situation. It's a complex filing, and that's definitely engage legal counsel early so that it can be done properly.
I think I have like a little guidebook I can send you if you want. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
My name's Bobby, and along the same vein, sort of, I just recently joined a new startup called Revolution, and it deals with benefit corporations, the B Corp. I'm not too familiar with the legal aspect of that, although a couple of my partners are lawyers, but what is your experience with that? And I think that allows you to be for-profit, but think of stakeholder profit instead of just shareholder.
Yeah, the benefit corporation, I think, it's a new thing, actually, and so and I have not, I have not worked with one personally, but I've read about them, and the fact is that what you basically do is you can put the interest of like what your benefit is above profits for your stakeholders and shareholders. But I don't know the particular ins and outs. I just know generally. Yeah, but good for you.
Okay. Yes.
My name is Elizabeth, and I'm a co-founder of a company called Shift Alliance, and I was actually going to bring up that exact thing. So California is the 6th state that just passed legislation for a new kind of corporation, and it's a benefit corporation. So it's the graying of for-profit and non-profit. So you can put your stakeholder interests as your primary interest, and it's fantastic. And I was going to ask if you've dealt with that. We're a certified B Corp, and so certified B Corps are different than just registering as a benefit corporation, but you can do it, and it's new. New York was the 7th state, and this all just happened about 2-3 weeks ago. So it's the whole social enterprise movement, and it's fantastic, and I'd love to talk to people about it.
I'd love to hear about people's experience and have the opportunity to work on that.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Can you talk about a legal mistake that turned into an opportunity?
Oh boy.
You just made my head blow up. A legal mistake that turned into an opportunity, that's a tough one.
Maybe it was a legal mistake for the entrepreneurs, but an opportunity for you.
To negotiate further.
Oh, come on. We don't like it when you get sued. I guess I'm trying to think of, I had long time ago a client who, this was when the .coms were really big, and they had failed to acquire, I guess, a particular name, and so it caused them to change the name of the company, which wasn't a bad thing, because you're so stuck on what you think your name is. And then they suddenly realized that they couldn't acquire that name and they couldn't get the website. And it caused them to go back to the drawing board and think about, again, who they are and what their name is that would represent who they are. And it ended up being fairly successful. That's kind of what I can think of. And I guess, as I listened to John Nazar previously, and he said, mistakes. You're going to make mistakes, and you just, we roll with the punches. Things happen, you're business guys. Sometimes you got to move quickly. You can't consult with your attorneys all the time. And again, my advice is you want an attorney who goes, okay, you called me, something happened. Let's roll with this. Let's see what we can do with it. You want somebody who's practical and applies, common sense, and and also tell you maybe if a mistake is, this one's big, and then talk to you about the risks and what can we do to work with it as well. That's what entrepreneurs do. That's what makes you successful, is just kind of keep moving forward.
Any other questions in the audience?
So, yeah, suppose you hire a team to outsource something that you're trying to build, right? Much the same way, basically. So, you obviously do you have to protect your IP when you're disclosing that business logic or the algorithms that you're asking them to implement?
Oh, yeah.
You gotta set yourself up. How? What's the, can you go to the document names or what do you just have an NDA? Is that not?
Yeah, you're going to have, in your consulting agreement, you're going to have language in there with regards to confidentiality, to assignment of inventions, if they are producing intellectual property for your company, to make sure that you're the owner and not them as well. Non-disclosure. I mean, that's basically if you're looking for the names, and that's how you generally protect it. And then depending on exactly, what it is, we take a look at it from a legal end and see, is there anything else that we consider? But that's generally what we look at. And that's what you see any company who is, outsourcing or bringing in, I have small companies, one-person shop, they're not, they're not a software person. They're not, writing the code, but they got to bring somebody in. One, because they're not going to get anybody to invest in their company unless they know that they have somebody who's writing the code. And who is the, kind of the back office engineer person. And, they've gone through several people and they got kind of bitten a couple times where people, they read the agreement and it would say like, whatever I invented is mine. And they're like, well, wait a minute, this is my big idea, and then kind of the ownership that they were asking for as well. So just generally that is, kind of how you protect yourself. And there's, and you can, one, I would say first, go look at publicly available resources with regards to name of agreements, invention, assignment of invention, non-disclosure, confidentiality agreements. Work for hire, consult, yeah.
Well, another thing that you may want to do, and this is something that happened to me, I hired an independent contractor who decided to put my clients' logos on her website as if they were her own clients, yet she was working for me. So you may want to add things like that in your contracts that say you cannot use, if you're working for me and we're working under a certain client, you are not allowed to advertise that it's your client. You need to have that kind of documentation.
Use of trade names, logos, all of that is important.
That assignment of invention is so important. We know somebody who hired somebody to design their website, and the guy just stole everything. He just made everything his, and the man lost millions. So really be careful.
Katherine, I know a lot of people sometimes ask in California whether or not non-competes and confidentiality, like to what extent are they really enforceable and to what extent are they valuable?
Okay. Well, first of all, California is employee-friendly, stockholder-friendly. So under that philosophy, California does not like non-competes because you can't tell somebody that you can't do certain type of work because then they don't have the ability to earn. The only time a non-compete is enforceable is when you as an owner is selling a business. So, my mom, as a matter of fact, was an employee at a company that was being sold, and the purchaser came in and asked her to sign a non-compete, and bless her heart, she did. I said, what are you doing? Because it's not enforceable against you. And as a matter of fact, if you think you're going to be tricky too, and you go to your employees and you ask them to sign non-competes, the California courts do not like that, and they will penalize you for that as well. Usually, you look at non-solicits. Is also, because you have employees, you don't want them when they leave. You can't say, well, you can't be in this same business, but you don't solicit my employees, don't solicit, you can't, walk away, and that's why you have confidentiality as well. The only time as lawyers in California that non-competes are going to be enforceable again is the sale of a business and that you're a substantial business owner. So, if you're selling the assets of the business or you're selling the equity interest in the business. That's the only time. And it has to be reasonable as well, where the business is conducted and only for a reasonable period of time.
And I think with that, there's two learning lessons. One is that there's many times when you would disclose your business model to your employees and they learn it and they start competing businesses. It happens. That's life. It happens. I know so many people who've told me, sue them. And I'm like, well, we just need to do it better. Let them go start we'll do it better. It happens, and employees will think they know how to do it better, and that's okay. That happens. And in California, it's not always. They can't be taking your trade secrets. And so separately, that was my second point, is you also must make sure that you are cautious with the trade secrets and the trade secrets of your business, and making sure not only you identify them as trade secrets, but your employees know what are your trade secrets and where they lie. I mean, a lot of times people try to pretend that their whole business is a trade secret, so you obviously got to be careful with acting kind of overzealously with regard to that, but nevertheless, those are two things that sometimes as a business owner you just need to be aware of. It happens.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's probably nowhere else in the world where you have such highly qualified attorneys available to you free of charge. So we have a nice round of applause, please, for our legal team.